the political consultant Bob Shrum.
Yes.
He's got a new book out entitled No Excuses, and he used to work for Senator Edwards, and then he went to work for Senator John Kerry's campaign, split in effect with your husband. But he's got some really nasty things he's written in there about Senator Edwards, and I'm sure you've spoken to your husband about it. What does he think about what Shrum is saying?
Well, John has not actually read the things that Bob Shrum said about John. I have read them, and I have to say I'm enormously disappointed. As far as I can tell, there's not a single passage that is accurate.
Let me read to you
I'll be happy to.
One example of what Bob Shrum writes. He says, the consensus view from both the foreign policy experts and the political operatives was that even though Edwards was on the Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, he was too junior in the Senate. He didn't have the credibility to vote against the resolution. To my continuing regret, I said he had to be for it. He was the candidate, and if he really was against the war, it was up to him to stand his ground. He didn't, because he was referring to the vote in October of 2002 in favor of the resolution authorizing President Bush to go to war against Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Is Shrum right about that?
Can I tell you what really happened?
Please.
There was a meeting on teacher tenure issues at our house that a number of people were at. And Bob Shrum was one of the people who came. He always liked to come to policy, thinks he's very interested in policy, and he always wanted to express his opinion. At that meeting, which was entirely about education, at some point in the discussion, Bob Shrum, I don't know whether Bob Shrum was the one who brought it up, but Iraq became a topic of conversation. It was not the purpose of the meeting. There were no foreign policy consultants there of any or advisors of any kind in the room, because it was an education meeting. And Bob Shrum said that John Kerry had hurt himself by voting against Iraq 1, and that John couldn't. At that meeting, another person who, I'm going to let him speak for himself, another person who is an economist spoke out against the Iraq War. This was not why he was there. John was disinterested in it. I was also, in addition to being at that meeting, I was also at a meeting later where John really did have the foreign policy advisors there. People who had previously worked in the State Department, worked in the National Security Council. He was listening to what they said, because that meant he was getting information from George Tenet, but also getting information from people who had worked in the Clinton administration. Those two pieces of information jibed, and though John was not happy with and confident about George Bush, he was convinced that if he was getting it from the Bush administration and the Clinton people thought the same thing, the information was reliable. Unfortunately, it was not, which is why John said the words every woman likes to hear her husband say every once in a while, I was wrong.
And Senator Clinton voted for that resolution as well. She says now, if she knew then what she knew now, she wouldn't have. There's another passage, and you were there at this event, and I want your take on this. Shrum writes this. He says, more troubling was an exchange we had one afternoon as we were throwing around questions and answers in his law firm's conference room. What is your position, Mr. Edwards, on gay rights, I asked. I'm not comfortable around those people, was how he began his answer. You were there, supposedly, at that conversation. What happened?
John talked, I believe that Bob Shrum brought up the issues of gays and lesbians, and John said, I come from a small southern town, Baptist, as far as I know, I don't know, this is honestly, he said, honestly, an abstract issue for me, because he said, I don't really know, as far as I know any gay people, so sort of talk to me about it. And I said, well, actually you do. And I said, I referred to a friend of mine from English graduate school, and how we had been John and I had been out for the evening. I saw this old friend from English graduate school when we were still in law school, and I went over and spoke to him, and I knew that he was gay. And I said, I'm engaged. There's the fellow over there I'm engaged to. And he said, oh, he's awfully cute. I might snake him if I wasn't with you, if he wasn't with you. And I told John that, and this is where he used the word uncomfortable. He said, that made me feel uncomfortable. So Bob correctly remembers the word uncomfortable, but incorrectly remembers the circumstances in which he said it. I mean, all of us feel uncomfortable at someone snaking us, I guess, trying to snake us in the presence of our fiance, and that made him feel uncomfortable. And John talked about that. So he remembers it slightly, but he remembers it incorrectly. And I have from my book, you'll know I remember things in quite good detail from years ago, and I remember this conversation very clearly. And I have talked to John about that, and he does recall exactly the same thing.